Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. I have to apologize again for the delay. Life has just been crazy the last couple of weeks. We're preparing for my husband to have a total knee replacement on one leg in a couple days, on the other leg in a couple of weeks. So, between that and not having as much office support the last month or so, plus a couple of project delays, it's just been crazy, and YouTube has been at the bottom of my heap. So, very sorry, and I'm glad that you're here with me today. It's funny because I feel like I manage my workload pretty well and I manage my timelines pretty well. And even when things come up out of the blue, I can manage a certain number of things. But as I said, I've had a couple of projects delayed. So they should have been finished in February, March, and they're now finishing up in May, June. And then I'd also created some personal deadlines with work so that I can make sure that I'm available to support my spouse during his recovery over the next 10 days. And it has just been nuts. And then, of course, I logged into YouTube to record this live discussion of our weekly newsletter. And I had another troll comment on one of our lifeguard videos that the demonstration is wrong. And you got to take it with a grain of salt. All engagement is engagement, whether it's people who like what you're doing or who don't like what you're doing. But I got to laugh because this is one of those Ruth Lee demonstration videos I've had up on the channel for 6 or 7 years, gets a lot of traffic. And every 2 to 3 months, there's somebody who jumps into the comments and says, "This is wrong." And I politely reply to keep the engagement going. But the balls to say that the technique is wrong. Why would I put up an incorrect technique on the internet? Never mind my personal credentials as a national lifeguard instructor, national lifeguard instructor trainer for over 10, 15 years. I mean, I don't need to be right. I'm not upset about it. It's just bizarre to me that people on the internet will come and say, "This is wrong," as though it's wrong. Why would I post something that's wrong? I know it's right. In any case, thank you for being here. Thanks for reading the newsletter. Or if you don't read the newsletter, you're here to listen to me chat about the newsletter. Let's do that. We are going to be talking today about the May 13th, 2026 weekly newsletter. And it's funny, this one is also a little bit controversial because the start of the newsletter came about because of a similar kind of troll situation earlier this week. So I had a consultation with somebody, and then I had a question for somebody else that I know about their facility. And their facility is pretty distinctive. I'm being intentionally vague here. But I had supported this person in the past with their aquatic facility, both in terms of financial compensation. They paid me to take the certified pool operator course a number of years ago, but also then in terms of the general support that I provide any, honestly, industry colleague, client, friend, whether you've given me money or not. If you send me an email, a text, a phone call, and you're looking for resources, information, procedures, news articles, examples, legal precedent, I'm just happy to connect people, be a knowledge giver, and occasionally I am also a knowledge taker. But I'm very clear with people, hey, I'm looking at examples of this for such and such a client. Sometimes I am paid to find those examples, but typically I'm not. I'm just amassing that information. So I found it a bit bizarre this week that somebody to whom I had provided information and resources in the past without compensation then turned around and said, "Nope, we're not going to share some information that you're requesting because it would be going to someone else who is going to operate a competing business." I say if because the business isn't built, the business isn't running, the business is not even in the same geographic region. And that person is entitled to be a fussy business owner and say, "Yeah, I don't want to share information." I've definitely worked with fussy business owners over the years who are absolutely obsessed with privacy. There's NDAs involved. They believe that their business practices are proprietary and heaven help you if you share them. But it was interesting for me, as a growth moment because I've been doing, we're all doing lots of growth, but I've been doing lots of growth the last couple of years in this area. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is a hard line for me that this person is not willing to see any form of collaboration over competition. So I understand the person said, "No, I don't want to share information." But that is definitely something that is unusual, outside of my sphere of people I normally interact with, people with whom I choose to work with, and it was just, the reason I shared it in the newsletter this week is because it was such an interesting moment where I was like, "Nope, I'm not being emotional here. I'm thinking about it for 24 hours as I should, but this is a hard no for me to want to interact with this person or their business again in the future." That doesn't mean I'll decline service if they want to come back and take the certified pool operator class again in the future. Sure, no problem. But I'm going to really give some thought as to whether um, the somebody with whom their business principles align with what I want to be doing as a business owner. So I just thought I would share that. May not be applicable to everyone. You're not all business owners in the strict sense of having, let's say, a for profit business, but you're all business operators in the sense that you manage aquatic facilities. Even when they're for municipalities and your goal is not to make a profit, so to speak, you're managing all aspects of operations from staffing to procurement, chemicals, operations, programming. It's a lot. It's basically like having a separate child. It needs constant tending and care in order to stay healthy. So that was the first part of the newsletter this week. And I'm always grateful to a consultant that we had at one of my last traditional jobs. It was a municipal pool manager job. And the rec department had engaged this consultant long before I got there. And she taught all of us, the pool manager, the facility manager, the parks manager, all of those roles. She always taught us about every conversation is a request. Can you send me that email? Is a request. Can I register in swim lessons? Is a request. Can I leave work early? Is a request. Can you add more aqua fitness classes to the schedule? That is a request. We can choose to engage with that request by accepting, yes, I will, declining, no, I won't, or negotiating, I will if this gets done, or only if, right? There's conditions, negotiations, trade off back and forth. And so I've used that framework a lot with my consulting work over the last 8, 9 years, and I think it's always helpful to think, like, what is the request? I made a request for information, the person declined, and that's fair. It's done. But I thought it was a good business lesson for me to think, "Okay, well, do I wanna engage in that kind of conversation with that person again?" Probably not. The second part of the op-ed at the top of the newsletter this week, I had 2 shorter topics instead of 1 longer topic, is I have still been following, like, I'm not subscribed to her feeds, but I'm still kind of following every few weeks what Emily Kieser is doing out of Arizona. Emily Kieser, a lot of you will recall, we've covered extensively. She is the one who experienced, her son experienced a non-fatal drowning while she was out of the house for the first time since she'd had a baby. Her husband was meant to be watching the baby and the toddler. The toddler allegedly got into the backyard. The pool was uncovered from a protective netting. There was no pool fence. And as reports indicate, the child struggled, was in the water for, I believe the reports from the police were 15 to 20 minutes before being retrieved, taken to hospital, and he was taken off of life support. Her like, she was a get ready with me mommy influencer, and there was a lot of pushback initially when this happened last year pertaining to claims by people in her comments, followers, subscribers, that she had been allegedly made aware for months, for years, presumably, in comments about the need to add a pool fence into her design. I'm not going to speculate on why she didn't, but I did go back into her Instagram and TikTok after the incident and found a number of Get Ready With Me daily vlogs where the pool was very clearly uncovered. The door to the backyard, like sliding glass doors, was clearly open. The child was biking around the pool unprotected. So I'm not here to, lay any blame at her feet because she was out of the house, regardless of what layers of protections were in place or not. Her husband was at home and was meant to be supervising the baby and the toddler got into the pool and ended up dying. And she has experienced tremendous grief. I'm sure the whole family has. She took a number of months off of social media. And where I'm going with this is that when she came back to social media towards the end of the summer, she had a statement on her social media, which I've linked in our past newsletters, which I called at the time, an act of PR mastery. I genuinely didn't believe that it was necessarily as heartfelt as one might expect. And I think that I was definitely wrong in terms of assigning some expectations of what her guilt should look like. She's been very performative. Excuse me, performative is, I don't mean like she's acting her guilt. She shouldn't have to perform her guilt for the public. She shouldn't have to share it. She has come back to social media. And what I wanted to say is that over the last few months, I've been following her social media it's coming up on the 1 year anniversary of her son's death. I really think that this is somebody who is going to make this her life's work. I think a lot of the negative complaints I saw on the internet were people who expected her to walk away from her social media career completely, and that didn't happen. So then some people, and perhaps I was swayed by that, were expecting, a complete 360, 180, and that's not what's happened. She's resumed her social media career. She's doing what she was doing before. However, she has repeatedly, many, many times in many, many platforms, talked about her son's preventable drowning, layers of protection, how difficult it is to experience the 1 year anniversary of his death, to know that she could have done more. And where I'm going with all of this is I want to say that I was completely wrong. I think this woman is going to make drowning prevention, water safety, her life's work as a key component of her social media presence. She is going to use her social media platform to propagate this types of information, and in a modern way that we need to see, that is perhaps more effective than traditional social media campaigns that we used to do at pools and schools and what have you. I looked her up on Social Blade, and she is 347th in terms of ranking on TikTok, in terms of audience and reach. Over 5 million users. That says nothing about the impressions. Some of her posts have, 60, 70, 80 million impressions. And I really am starting to wonder if in 20 years we are going to talk about this woman in the same way we do founders like Candace from Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There are substantial ways that she is impacting water safety and drowning prevention that myself as a lifeguard and a non-parent just simply cannot reach those audiences. So I definitely think I got it wrong. And I'm happy to say that, she, I guess I don't want to speculate too much here. She is channeling what energy she can towards education and advocacy, regardless of how painful this situation is for her personally and her family. She shouldn't have to perform grief. I'm not saying she's performing because she doesn't feel it, but I'm saying she shouldn't have to share it. And she is. So I'm grateful to her for being willing to do that to the extent that she's currently comfortable. In that vein, May is Water Safety Month. It has completely flown by. I know I have not done a good job of a ton of water safety on the Lakeview Aquatics social media pages. I've been a little bit quieter on Instagram just with work and how busy I've been. Also, I haven't been traveling as much and I'm behind catching up on content from earlier this year. But if you manage a pool or an aquatic facility and you also realize that the month is half over and you haven't done anything, hop on over to the National Drowning Prevention Alliance, their website. They have a free toolkit where you can download at a minimum some social media posts that you can include on your business page, because that is an easy way to start by educating and advocating for water safety and drowning prevention, especially as we head into summer. It is the Victoria Day long weekend here in Canada. Next weekend is Memorial Day in the US. And so even if you're like me here in Alberta and it snowed yesterday, so nobody's outdoors swimming, it is something to be aware of as we head into summer. As always, the bottom half of the newsletter has some more information regarding the different news articles I've been reading and thinking about. I don't have a particular trend for this upcoming week, but lots of different things happened that I haven't thought about before. Some of you have been following the Washington, D.C. reflecting pool saga. President Trump assigned a contract to resurface is not the right word, but essentially, and paint is not the right word either, but coat the interior of the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. before the obelisk, between the Capitol and the obelisk, so to speak. I think that's the Washington National Monument. And so there's been big conversations in the pool industry. What color are they picking? It now appears to be like a very dark navy blue. What product are they using? I saw one industry thread on the internet talking about how the price in terms of pool work is actually very competitive, in the sense that somebody broke down the numbers in a post and said, if it's this product at this cost per gallon, this square footage, this much labor, it works out to about, I think he said, $40 per square foot or per hour of labor. And then somebody else, meanwhile, in a non-industry group was saying, this is an obscene use of money. So I'm not really qualified to comment on those items. I'm also not an American, so I don't have the same vested interest in this heritage landmark. But it is something that I'm watching, because it is a pool to an extent, even though it's not a swimming pool. It is a body of water that is treated to prevent bacteria and disease and mosquitoes, right? It is recirculated to an extent, even if it is very shallow. And shallow pools have their own challenges. I know I've seen this in terms of landscaping videos that I've watched, where a reflecting pool in a dark color can also be really challenging to keep clear and free from algae. So, although it's not something that I specialize in, I do recognize that, especially fountains in hotel lobbies or outside in decorative areas of resorts or condo buildings, it is a water feature to be aware of. Some other news articles I mentioned this week. There was a Muslim swim event canceled in Texas, which was really discouraging, because I think that there is a place for, um, you know, events that are geared towards, but open to everyone. Let's say they're geared towards Muslim men or women, no different from Jewish Orthodox swims for men or women. They're segregated based on preference. They're not only for Muslims or only for Jews. They're open to anybody of that gender. I know they're polarizing in some regions, but I do think there's value in having them, in offering them. And it was discouraging to see that this facility felt like they had to cancel this event or face backlash, whether it was funding or bad PR. It's just unfortunate to see those things happening. One of the other stories I shared this week that I would really encourage you to click on, the newsletter is linked down in this description box below. There was a horrible act of vandalism in France. The video is in French, but you can select automatic dubbing on YouTube. And honestly, you could have it muted and you would still understand the gist of what happened. But essentially, at this municipal pool in France, people broke in overnight and drained a bunch of pool water and threw a bunch of heavy equipment into the pool basin. And frankly, it is unbelievable that more damage did not occur, because if you drain water below the skimmer lines, you can seriously damage the circulation pump. You can crack the hair and lint strainers. You can collapse pipes on the system based on the pressure, because the system is starved hydraulically. To say nothing of throwing heavy equipment into a basin can cause structural damage if there's not enough water to slow the fall and it hits the bottom of the pool. So I'm sure to some teenagers this seemed like a cool prank, but it's absolutely unbelievable the potential damage that they could have caused if this hadn't been. It doesn't look too bad from the video, but it could have been much, much worse. There are reports that work on Royal Caribbean's private destination Perfect Day Mexico has resumed. There was some debate internally within the government of Mexico in that region, that state, regarding the environmental impact. I shared some updates on Birch Bay water slides, which are in the Pacific Northwest. Some of you might recall that park is now under new ownership or new management after serious injuries occurred at that water park during the pandemic. There were some substantial lacerations or cuts to people's legs, I should say. A couple other articles I shared, some reports of Legionnaire's disease at a Ritz-Carlton hotel. I shared some articles pertaining to the usage of carbon monoxide detectors in pool areas. This is something that I have a personal passion for from my work on the job. When I used to manage a pool, I was educated by a consultant at some point about domestic carbon monoxide alarms. And I always thought, okay, well, let's just add an extra carbon monoxide alarm in the mechanical room of the pool or in industrial spaces. Why not? What harm does it have? Well, after we had a carbon monoxide incident at one of my pools, I learned from the fire department that domestic carbon monoxide alarms really do not alarm or go off until 50 parts per million, which is a very large spike because the perception is if it was a lower threshold, they would go off all the time and people would ignore them. So residential grade alarms go off at 50 parts per million, which is very, very high and is much higher than a daily 8-hour occupational exposure. And so where I'm going with this is that people install these domestic units in commercial application, expecting them to work, and then they have a false sense of security that they will work if something were to go wrong. When if you have legitimate concerns about carbon monoxide in an area like a pool mechanical room, you should be looking at proper commercial grade sensors or sensors that alarm at a lower threshold. And so I did share a resource going back to an incident in Minnesota. It's a few years old, but I just heard about it. And I thought some of the wording associated with this was really, really important for those of us in pool operations. I shared a few other stories about pools that are closing due to the infrastructure crisis. I shared an article about the new above ground pool coalition out of the US. I shared an article pertaining to a settlement over a drowning fatality in Tempe, Arizona. And then just a few other hodgepodge articles regarding the history of Austin, Texas's Burton Springs pool, a woman who was charged potentially in association with the drowning fatality of somebody at her child's birthday party at the pool. Duplicate drain covers, those are the stuff of nightmares, right? Duplicate drain covers that are not VGBA compliant. But a bit of a shorter newsletter this week because of just kind of what was going on and what articles I found. So that is it for this week. Thanks so much for catching up with me. I know we're a little bit delayed. I will be back here in just a couple of days with this week's newsletter, which will be out on May 20th via email. And then I do try and get the recording up on YouTube within a few days. We do still have lots in queue in terms of our National Lifeguard content, cruise vlog content, as well as some other facility tour content. So please do consider subscribing so that you're updated when these videos are released. And we hope to get back on a regular schedule in the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.